When five rival enforcers cornered John Kang on a rain-slicked alley behind Koreatown's most exclusive club, they thought they had him. The Korean Mafia boss in his blood-spattered white suit had run out of exits, out of bodyguards, out of luck. But they didn't know about the single mother in the pencil skirt who'd been watching from the shadows, or that her hands remembered a language of violence she'd spent 6 years trying to forget. John Ice Prince Kang didn't believe in accidents. In his world, every ambush was orchestrated, every betrayal was bought, and survival was a transaction paid in blood, or leverage. Tonight, pinned against graffitied brick with broken ribs and 5 men closing in, he was calculating which would cost less. Jane Brooks had left that life behind when her daughter turned 3. The Marine Corps combatives instructor who could dismantle a man twice her size became a financial analyst who wore sensible heels and arrived early to daycare pickup. She told herself the tremor in her hands during fireworks was just stress, that the way she mapped exits in every room was just caution. But muscle memory doesn't forget. And when she heard the wet crack of fists on bone echoing from the alley beside her parked car, her body moved before her mind could argue. Some instincts don't die, they just wait. Welcome back, my beautiful souls and kindred spirits. Before we start, go ahead and subscribe, like, and share where you're watching from. It always warms my heart to see our little storytelling family stretch across the world. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you give helps us keep uncovering these unforgettable stories together. So find your quiet place, settle in, and let me take you somewhere you've never been before. Jane's Honda Civic was making that sound again, the one her mechanic kept saying would cost $800 to fix. $800 she didn't have, not with Zara's asthma medication jumping to $350 a month and the daycare threatening to drop them if she was late on payment one more time. She was running the numbers in her head, trying to figure out which bill could wait another week when she heard it. Not a shout. Worse, the kind of silence that comes right before bones break. The alley behind Club Exodus wasn't on her route home. She'd taken the side street to avoid traffic on Western, and now she was parallel parked under a busted streetlight with 2 bags of groceries in her trunk, and her daughter waiting at her mother's apartment across town. She should have kept the engine running, should have minded her business like every other person in this neighborhood learned to do. But then came the wet thud of knuckles meeting flesh, and her hands froze on her keys. Through the gap between buildings, she saw him. The man in the white suit, now streaked with blood, staggered against the brick wall like a dancer who'd forgotten his steps. 5 men formed a semicircle around him, dressed in black tactical gear that didn't belong in civilian Los Angeles. They moved with synchronized precision, the kind that came from training, from repetition, from muscle memory that didn't need thought. She knew that movement, had lived it for 6 years. The tallest one had a steel pipe. The one on the left cracked his knuckles with mechanical efficiency. The man in the white suit tried to straighten, tried to find his footing, and she watched his leg give out, watched him catch himself against the wall with a hand that shook. "Should have stayed in Seoul, John," the one with the pipe said. His voice carried the flat affect of someone performing a job, not passion. The Jang family sends their regards. Jane's left hand was already on the door handle. Her right hand, the one that used to wrap athletic tape before sparring sessions, was trembling. "This isn't your fight. Zara's waiting. Your mother has book club at 8. The man in white looked up, and for 1 second their eyes met across the distance. His face was carved from the kind of beauty that survived violence, sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could cut glass. But his eyes, they held something she recognized, the math of survival, the cold calculation of a man counting his remaining seconds. She knew that look, had seen it in mirrors during her 3rd deployment. The pipe came down. Jane was out of the car before she'd made the conscious choice to move. Her heels hit pavement, and 6 years of pretending to be someone else evaporated like steam off hot asphalt. Her body remembered what her mind had been trying to forget. The grocery bag slipped from her hands. Eggs cracked. Milk cartons split open and pooled across the concrete. Zara's favorite cereal scattered like shrapnel. The 5 men didn't hear her coming. They were focused on their target, on finishing the job they'd been paid to do. Professional, efficient, fatal. They didn't see the woman in the pencil skirt and Target clearance blouse. They didn't see the way she shifted her weight to the balls of her feet or how her breathing changed from shallow civilian panic to the measured rhythm of controlled violence. By the time the closest one registered movement in his peripheral vision, Jane's elbow was already connecting with his temple, and the rain that had been threatening all evening finally began to fall. Jane's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She'd made it home by 11 after the rain had washed most of the blood down the storm drains, and the man in the white suit had disappeared into a black Mercedes that materialized from nowhere. She hadn't waited for thank yous, hadn't exchanged names, just retrieved what was left of her groceries and driven to her mother's place with her knuckles throbbing and her heart rate refusing to settle. Zara had been asleep on the couch, one small fist curled around her blanket, completely unaware that her mother had just put 3 men in the hospital. Jane had carried her daughter to the car, buckled her into the booster seat, and driven the 15 minutes to their apartment in Inglewood with the radio off and her rear-view mirror checked every 30 seconds. Now it was 2 in the morning, and she was sitting at her kitchen table with a bag of frozen peas pressed against her right hand while Zara slept in the bedroom they shared. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional siren from the street below. 580 square feet that cost $1,900 a month. Beige carpet with stains she'd tried to scrub out. A kitchen window that overlooked a parking lot where someone's car alarm went off at least twice a week. This was her life, the one she'd built after discharge, after therapy, after the nightmares had decreased from nightly to just most nights. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Zara forgot Mr. Hoppy, she'll want him for breakfast. Jane looked at the stuffed rabbit on the counter, its worn ears flopped to one side. She'd meant to grab it before they left. Her brain had been somewhere else, in an alley, in the space between one breath and the decision to throw the first strike. She typed back, "Got him, thanks, Mom." The knock on her door came 3 minutes later. Not loud, not aggressive, just 3 measured raps that somehow felt more threatening than if someone had been pounding. Jane was on her feet before the second knock finished. Her body moved on autopilot, positioning herself between the door and Zara's bedroom. Her eyes scanned for weapons. The chef's knife was in the dish rack. The baseball bat she kept for emergencies was in the closet, too far. She looked through the peephole. The man on the other side was Asian, early 30s, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He stood with the kind of posture that suggested military training, weight distributed evenly, hands visible and empty at his sides. Not a threat position, but not casual either. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice quiet enough that it wouldn't wake the neighbors. "My name is Lin Fei. I work for the man you helped tonight. I'm not here to cause trouble." Jane's hand stayed on the deadbolt. "Then you should leave." "I will, in 1 minute." He shifted slightly, and she saw the edge of a shoulder holster under his jacket. "Mr. Kang wanted me to deliver his gratitude personally, and to ask how you learned to move like that." "I don't know what you're talking about." "You dropped the first attacker in under 2 seconds, dislocated the second one's shoulder with a joint lock I've only seen in advanced Krav Maga. The third one has a fractured orbital bone from your knee strike." Lynn's voice held something between respect and curiosity. "That's not self-defense class training, Ms. Brooks. That's combat experience." Jane said nothing. "Mr. Kang employs people with specialized skills, people who need work that pays better than financial analyst positions. He'd like to meet with you, tomorrow, just coffee, no obligation." "I have a daughter." "We know, which is why the offer includes health insurance, the kind that covers pre-existing conditions like childhood asthma, the kind that doesn't have a $3,000 deductible." Jane watched through the peephole as he turned and walked toward the stairs. She didn't pick up the card until she heard the building's front door close, didn't read it until she'd checked that Zara was still asleep. The address was in Beverly Hills. The meeting time was 2 p.m., and underneath, in handwritten ink, "You saved my life. Let me return the favor." Jane called in sick to work for the first time in 11 months. She'd spent the hours between Bon and Zara's wake-up time staring at the business card, running scenarios in her head the way her CO used to make her do before missions. Best case, worst case, most likely case. The problem was that all 3 scenarios ended with her still broke, still 1 emergency away from eviction, still measuring her daughter's breathing at night and praying the inhaler would last until payday. At 9 a.m., she'd dropped Zara at daycare with a promise of McDonald's for dinner if she was good. At 10, she'd sat in her car outside the Beverly Hills address for 20 minutes, watching men in suits enter and exit a building that looked like it ate people like her for breakfast. She never made it to 2 p.m. The call came at 1:15. Cheryl from daycare, her voice tight with the kind of forced calm that meant something was very wrong. "Miss Brooks, there are men here asking for Zara. They're not police. They don't have any documentation. I told them they couldn't see her, but they're not leaving, and I think you should—" Jane was already running to her car. "Lock the doors. Keep her in the back room. I'm 8 minutes away." She made it in 6, breaking 4 traffic laws and praying no cops were bored enough to care. The daycare looked normal from the outside. Bright primary colors, playground with wood chips, the hand-painted sign that said Little Sprouts Learning Center in cheerful letters. But there were 2 black SUVs parked in the loading zone with their engines running. Jane's phone buzzed before she could get out of the car. Unknown number. "Don't go inside." Lin Fei's voice. "They're waiting for you." "My daughter is in there." "I know. I'm 2 blocks away. Give me 3 minutes." "I don't have 3 minutes." Jane was already opening her door. "Jane." His voice changed, harder. "The men in those vehicles work for the 7-star syndicate. They're the ones who sent the team last night. They know who you are now, they know where you live, and they've decided that anyone who can take down their soldiers is either an asset or a threat." Her hand froze on the door handle. "How do they know where I live?" "Because John Kang has enemies who've spent 20 years learning how to hurt him, and last night you became someone he's indebted to, which makes you leverage." Jane's breath caught. Through the daycare window, she could see Cheryl holding Zara's hand, keeping her away from the front door where 2 men in leather jackets were having a conversation that looked too casual to be anything but practiced intimidation. What do they want? To send a message that nobody gets between them and Kang, that mercy has consequences. Lin's voice dropped. "Stay in your car, please. I'm almost there." She didn't stay in the car, but she didn't go through the front door either. She went around back, through the gate that led to the playground, moving with the kind of speed that came from pure maternal terror. She was halfway across the wood chips when she heard the first scream. Not from inside, from behind her. Jane turned and saw smoke rising from the direction of her apartment building. Black smoke. The kind that came from accelerants, from gasoline and matches and decisions made by people who wanted to erase problems efficiently. Her phone buzzed again, different number, a video message. Her apartment was on fire. Flames were already eating through her kitchen window, the one that overlooked the parking lot. Her 580 square feet, everything she owned, every photo of Zara's first steps, every report card, every memory that proved they'd existed in this city. The text came through beneath the video. Should have stayed out of it. Jane's vision tunneled. Her hands stopped shaking. That cold clarity she remembered from combat situations flooded her system, the kind that made time slow down and decisions become binary. Behind her, through the daycare window, she saw one of the leather jacket men reach for the door handle. And then Lin Fei's black Mercedes came around the corner doing at least 60 in a 25 zone, and Jane knew that the life she'd been trying to build had just burned to ash. The safe house didn't look like a fortress. It looked like a Pasadena craftsman that belonged to a family who summered in the Hamptons and drove Teslas. Hardwood floors, exposed beams, a kitchen with marble countertops that probably cost more than Jane's entire burned apartment. This has automatically become their hideout, none that she can reject. She had no choice. Zara had fallen asleep 20 minutes into the drive, still clutching Mr. Hoppy, completely unaware that her bedroom no longer existed. Lin had carried her inside without being asked, navigating the stairs with the careful precision of someone who understood that waking a sleeping child was its own kind of emergency. Now it was past midnight, and Jane sat in a living room that was too clean, too expensive, too far from anything that felt like her life. Lin had given them the master bedroom, had shown her where the security panel was, where the panic button connected directly to John Kang's personal line, had explained in that measured voice that probably worked great for hostage negotiations that she and Zara couldn't go home, that there was no home to go back to. She'd nodded through all of it, had watched him make coffee she didn't drink, had answered his questions about whether Zara had allergies, what her bedtime routine was, whether Jane needed anything from a pharmacy that Lin could have delivered within the hour. She'd held it together until he'd left her alone. Then she'd walked into the bathroom, turned on the shower to cover the sound, and cried for the first time since her discharge 6 years ago. Not quiet crying, the kind that felt like drowning, the kind that came from watching everything you'd built turn to smoke because you'd made one decision in an alley behind a nightclub. When she finally came out, Lin was sitting at the kitchen island with his jacket off and his shoulder holster visible. He had a laptop open in front of him and a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold an hour ago. "Zara's still asleep," he said without looking up. "I have someone monitoring the bedroom camera, just audio, no video, in case she wakes up scared." Jane should have been angry about cameras, should have demanded privacy, but all she felt was tired. "Thank you. The 7-star syndicate has eyes on every hospital in the city. They'll be looking for you to take Zara to urgent care, thinking she might have smoke inhalation." Lin finally looked up. His face carried the kind of exhaustion that came from years of not enough sleep. "I have a private doctor coming at 8 a.m., pediatric specialist. She'll check Zara completely, make sure she's okay. No records, no insurance billing, no paper trail." "How much does that cost?" "It's covered." "Nothing's covered." Jane sat down across from him. "Everything costs something. What does John Kang want from me?" Lin closed his laptop. "He wants to know why you helped him." "I already told your boss. Wrong place, wrong time." "You're a single mother working 2 jobs. You drive a 12-year-old Honda with a check engine light that's been on for 6 months. You buy generic cereal and you're 3 weeks behind on electric." Lin's voice wasn't judgmental, just factual. "Last night you could have driven past, should have driven past. Instead, you fought 5 trained operatives and won. That's not wrong place, wrong time. That's a choice." Jane's jaw tightened. "You been investigating me?" "It's what I do." He paused. "Marine Corps 2012 to 2018, 2 deployments, combatives instructor certified, honorable discharge. Then you disappeared into financial analyst work that pays $38,000 a year and doesn't use a single skill you spent 6 years developing. I have a daughter to raise." "You had a daughter before last night too, but you still got out of the car." Lin leaned forward. "Why?" The question sat between them like something physical. Jane looked at her hands. The knuckles were still swollen. There was a bruise forming across her right palm where she'd blocked the pipe. "Because I know what it's like," she said finally, "to be outnumbered, to do the math and realize you're not walking away. I saw that look on his face, your boss, John, whatever his name is." She met Lin's eyes. Nobody should die alone in an alley because everyone else decided it wasn't their problem. Lin was quiet for a long moment.
Then he did something she didn't expect. He rolled up his left sleeve. The scar ran from his wrist to his elbow. Surgical, precise, the kind that came from doctors trying to save function after catastrophic damage. Seoul, 2019, gang war between Kang's organization and the Jang family. I took a machete strike meant for John, severed 2 tendons, fractured the ulna. The surgeon said I'd never regain full use of my hand. He flexed his fingers. Took 18 months of physical therapy. John paid for all of it. Private specialists, experimental treatments, and when I could finally hold a gun again, he gave me a choice: walk away with enough money to retire or stay. You stayed. I stayed. Lynn's expression was unreadable. Because he visited me every week during recovery, not because I worked for him, because he felt responsible. He sat in that hospital room and talked about everything except business. Music, food, his sister back in Korea who wants him to quit and open a restaurant. He paused. Most bosses send flowers and a severance check. John sat with me during physical therapy and watched me relearn how to write my own name. Jane understood then, the loyalty that couldn't be bought, the kind that came from someone seeing you at your lowest and not looking away. The doctor's coming at 8, Lynn said. You and Zara should sleep. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. What if I want to leave? Take Zara somewhere the 7-star syndicate can't find us. Lynn's expression didn't change. Then I'll drive you to the airport myself and make sure you have enough cash to start over. John doesn't keep people against their will.
But they already know your face, your name, your mother's address, Zara's daycare. Running just means spending the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. He stood up, started toward the stairs, then stopped. Or you could stay. Let us handle the people who burned your home. And maybe, if you want, use those skills you've been pretending don't exist for the last 6 years. After he left, Jane sat in the too-clean living room and thought about choices, about the moment in that alley when she could have driven away, about the life she'd been trying to build and the one that had just burned to ash. Upstairs, through the ceiling, she heard Zara cough once in her sleep. Jane pulled out her phone and looked at her bank account. $243. Not enough to run, barely enough to survive. When the sun came up 3 hours later, she was still sitting there, watching the darkness fade into gray, trying to figure out which scared her more, the people who wanted her dead, or the fact that part of her had felt alive for the first time in years when her fist connected with that first attacker's temple. The doctor arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, exactly as Lynn had promised. By 8:30, Zara was declared perfectly healthy and was eating chocolate chip pancakes that someone had delivered from a restaurant Jane couldn't afford. At 9, John Kang walked through the front door, still moving carefully from his cracked ribs, and asked if they could talk. John Kang looked worse in daylight. The sharp jawline was still there, but now Jane could see the exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. The white suit was gone, replaced by dark jeans and a black Henley that didn't hide the bruising across his ribs. He'd sent Zara to the backyard with Lynn before asking Jane to sit. She'd stayed standing. "Lynn says you're former Marine Corps," John said. His English carried the faint accent of someone who'd learned it perfectly but hadn't been born to it. "Combatives instructor? 2 deployments? That's in the past. The past doesn't disappear just because we want it to." He moved to the window, watching Zara chase a butterfly across grass that was too green to be real. "I came to America 12 years ago with $3 million and a reputation that made investors nervous, built a nightclub empire, laundered my history into respectability, told myself I was different now." Jane said nothing. "Last night proved I was lying to myself." John turned to face her. "The 7-star syndicate won't stop. They've been trying to kill me for 2 years. Every time I think I've paid enough, sacrificed enough, they come back, because it's not about business anymore. It's about revenge. Then leave, take your money and disappear. I tried that once, left Korea with my sister's blood on my hands because I couldn't protect her from the Jang family." His voice went flat. "I won't run again, not when I have people who depend on me, employees, families, Lynn." Jane looked toward the backyard where Lynn was teaching Zara how to fold an origami crane. "What do you want from me?" "I want to hire you.
not as a bodyguard, as someone who can teach my security team how to actually fight. John's expression was serious. I employ 12 men who are very good at looking intimidating and checking IDs at club doors, but last night, 5 trained operatives nearly killed me because my people didn't know the difference between bar security and combat. I have a 6-year-old daughter who needs a mother that's alive, a home that won't burn down, medical care that requires choosing between rent and her inhaler. He paused. I'm offering you $200,000 a year, full benefits, housing, and when this is over, when the 7-star syndicate is no longer a threat, you can walk away with enough money to start over anywhere you want. Jane's hands clenched. $200,000. That was 5 years of her current salary. That was Zara's college fund. That was breathing room she'd never had. I don't kill people anymore, she said. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to keep people alive. 3 days later, Jane stood in a warehouse in Vernon that smelled like motor oil and old concrete. 12 men in various states of fitness stood in front of her, some with gym muscles, some with the soft edges of people who thought carrying a gun made them dangerous. Lady, I've been doing security for 8 years. Then you've been doing it wrong for 8 years. Jane looked at Lynn. Which one of these guys do you trust most in a fight? Chen. Lynn nodded toward a compact man in his 30s. Former police, fast hands. Chen, attack me. Ma'am, I don't think... You think I'm going to get hurt, or you are? Jane's voice was calm. This is lesson 1. Your ego will get you killed. Attack me. Chen moved. He was fast, probably had some martial arts training. He came in with a straight punch that would have worked great in a regulated match. Jane redirected it with her left hand, used his momentum to pull him off balance, and had him face down on the concrete with his arm locked behind his back in under 3 seconds.
She led him up. You telegraphed with your shoulder, committed your weight forward, didn't protect your base. She looked at the rest of the men. In a real fight, you don't get points for technique. You don't get second chances. You get hurt or you go home. That's it. For the next 6 hours, she broke them down, showed them where their stances were wrong, where their punches would get them killed, where their confidence would bury them. She didn't use fancy techniques, just efficiency, just the kind of movements that worked when someone was trying to end you and pretty didn't matter. By lunch, 3 men had quit. By dinner, 2 more were reconsidering their career choices. Lynn approached her while the remaining 7 were running through drills. You're harder on them than I expected. You want them ready for what's coming, or you want them confident? Both. Can't have both, not in 3 weeks. Jane watched Chen work through the armbar she'd shown him. He was getting it, slowly. How long until the 7-star syndicate makes another move? Intelligence says they're planning something for the opening of John's new club next month. Public venue, high profile. They want to send a message. Jane's jaw tightened. Then we have less time than I thought. That night, after Zara was asleep and the house was quiet, Jane sat in the backyard with her laptop and pulled up every file she could find on the 7-star syndicate. Lynn had given her access to Kang's private server, police reports, surveillance footage, financial records that probably weren't legal to possess. She studied their patterns, their tactics, the way they moved, the way they thought. By 3 a.m., she'd filled a notebook with diagrams and notes, weak points, entry strategies, exit routes. John found her there at dawn, still working. You should sleep. Sleep doesn't train your men. She didn't look up. The 7-star syndicate uses a 3-team structure: assault team, support team, extraction team. They hit fast, they hit hard, and they're gone before anyone can respond. If we're going to stop them, we can't just defend. We need to disrupt their entire operation. That's not defense, that's offense. Jane finally looked at him. You want to survive or you want to win? John was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat down across from her. Tell me what you need. 2 weeks later, Jane's 7 remaining trainees had transformed. They moved differently, thought differently. Chen could now drop someone twice his size in under 5 seconds. The others weren't far behind. But training wasn't enough, Jane knew that. She had seen too many soldiers die despite perfect preparation, because war didn't care about readiness. So she did what she'd learned in the Marines.
She gathered intelligence, she mapped terrain, she identified the enemy's next move before they made it. And on a Thursday afternoon, while reviewing surveillance footage from John's clubs, she saw it. The same face, 3 different locations. A man in his 40s, Asian, wearing different clothes but moving with the same careful precision. Casing exits, counting security, timing response patterns. "Lynn," she called. "We've got a problem." He was beside her in seconds. "What am I looking at?" "Reconnaissance. They're not waiting for next month's opening." Jane pulled up the timestamps. "This footage is from this week. They're planning something sooner." "How soon?" Jane's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. Jana's school, taken from across the street. Today, based on the weather. And underneath, Friday, 10 p.m., Club Exodus. Come alone or we start with the child. Jane's hands were steady as she forwarded the message to Lynn, but her voice when she spoke carried the cold precision of someone who'd just shifted from defense to war. "We don't wait for them to come to us. We end this tomorrow night. All of it." Jane spent 18 hours preparing for Friday night, mapping Club Exodus from basement to roof, drilling Chen and the team on urban combat scenarios, running through every possible outcome until her brain felt like static. But something was wrong. She felt it the way she used to feel IEDs before the detection equipment picked them up, that animal instinct that kept soldiers alive when training failed them. "She knows about the safe house," she said to John at 2 a.m. Friday morning. They were in his office, a converted study that looked like it belonged to a professor, not a crime boss. Books lined the walls, classical music played softly from hidden speakers. John looked up from the security reports he'd been reviewing. "What?" "The text. They sent me a photo of Jana's school," Jane paced. "But Jana hasn't been to school since the fire. She's been here in the safe house with private tutors. So how did they know she'd be at that location yesterday when I took her for a doctor's appointment?"
John's expression shifted. "You think we have a leak. I think we have a mole." Jane pulled out her laptop, "and I think I know how to find them." She'd made the call 6 hours earlier to a number she'd sworn she'd never use again, Captain Rebecca Torres, her former CO, the woman who'd recruited her into intelligence work during her second deployment. Torres had been reluctant, had reminded Jane that she was a civilian now, that accessing military intelligence databases was illegal, that there were consequences for the things Jane was asking. Jane had reminded Torres about Kandahar, about the firefight that would have ended with Torres bleeding out in the sand if Jane hadn't dragged her 300 yards to the extraction point under enemy fire. Sometimes friendship was a currency you only spent once. The files Torres sent were encrypted 6 ways: personnel records, financial transactions, border crossings, the kind of data that could end careers and start congressional investigations. Jane had spent the last 4 hours cross-referencing everything against the 7-star syndicate's movement patterns, and she'd found it. "Lynn has a brother," Jane said quietly. "Lin Wei, 2 years younger. You knew that?" John nodded slowly. They were estranged, haven't spoken in years. Wei made different choices, got involved with gangs in San Gabriel Valley. "He's not in San Gabriel anymore." Jane turned her laptop around. 3 months ago, he started working for a holding company in Monterey Park. Company's a shell, owned by another shell, 5 layers deep, but at the bottom, she pulled up the financial records. 7-star syndicate. John's face went very still. "Are you certain?" "Border crossings match their operational timeline. Financial transfers align with every attack on your businesses for the last year. And this," Jane pulled up surveillance footage from Club Exodus. "This is from last week, your security cameras." The video showed Lynn meeting with someone in the alley behind the club. The lighting was poor, but the body language was clear. 2 brothers who'd learned the same movements from the same teachers. "That's impossible," John said. "Lynn would never—" "Lynn didn't," Jane fast-forwarded. "Watch what happens after." In the footage, Lynn's brother handed him something, an envelope.
Lin opened it, read whatever was inside, and his entire posture changed. Shoulders dropped, head bowed, the universal language of someone receiving devastating news. Then Lin pulled out his phone and made a call. 4 seconds later, John's phone rang in the footage. He reported it immediately, called you, but his brother was already gone by the time your security responded. Lin's not the mole, but he's being leveraged through one. John's hands clenched. What was in the envelope? Jane pulled up another file. Medical records. A woman in her 60s. Cancer, stage 4. Lin's mother. She's in a care facility in Alhambra. Costs about $12,000 a month. Lin's been paying it on his salary, but 3 months ago, the payments stopped coming from his account. 7 Star is paying for her mother's treatment, and in exchange, Lin's brother feeds them information, probably doesn't even know where it's going, just tells Wei about schedules, movements, security changes, family loyalty, the kind that makes good people do terrible things. John stood and walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over Los Angeles, turning the smog into something almost beautiful. Does Lin know you found this? Not yet. He'll want to fix it himself, confront his brother, try to handle it internally, which is exactly what the 7 Star syndicate wants. They'll kill Wei the moment he's no longer useful, make Lin watch, break him completely. Jane closed her laptop. We need to move first. What are you proposing? We use it, feed Lin's brother information, wrong information, make the 7 Star syndicate think tonight's meeting is going exactly as they planned. Jane met John's eyes, but instead of walking into their trap, we set one of our own. John was quiet for a long moment. This puts Lin's brother in danger. His brother put himself in danger the moment he started selling you out, even if he thought he was just helping Wei. Jane's voice was hard. You want to protect everyone. That's admirable, but you can't save people who don't want to be saved. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Jane thought about her father, about the calls she'd made from Kandahar, begging him to go to rehab, sending money she couldn't afford for treatment he never completed, about the funeral she missed because she was deployed when his liver finally gave out. I am, she said. An hour later, Jane sat across from Lin in the safe house kitchen. Zara was still sleeping upstairs. Chen was on watch. The house was quiet except for the coffee maker gurgling.
Your brother's been compromised, Jane said. No preamble, no gentle lead-in. Lin's face didn't change, but his hands, clasped around his coffee cup, went very still. You're certain? I'm certain. Jane slid the files across the table. Your mother's care facility, the payments, the meetings in the alley, all of it. Lin opened the folder, read in silence. When he finally looked up, his eyes carried the kind of pain that came from loving someone who'd betrayed you. We always made bad choices, Lin said quietly. Even as kids, I tried to protect him, tried to keep him away from the gangs, but he wanted the easy money, the respect that came from fear. He closed the folder. Our mother doesn't know. She thinks we's doing well, working legitimate business. She doesn't need to know, but we does. Jane leaned forward. We can use this, feed him information through you, make the 7 Star syndicate think they're 3 steps ahead when really they're walking into our trap. And after, when this is over, that depends on we, whether he's been helping them willingly or whether they forced him. Jane paused. Either way, he can't keep feeding them intel. That ends tonight. Lin nodded slowly. Then he pulled out his phone and typed a message, showed it to Jane before sending. Need to talk. Same place as last week. 1 hour. He'll come, Lin said. He always comes when I ask, because part of him still believes we're brothers before we're anything else. Jane stood. Then let's make sure tonight is the last time he has to choose. 53 minutes later, Jane watched from a rooftop across from Club Exodus as Lin met his brother in the alley. She had Chen positioned at the north exit, 2 other team members covering the south. John was inside the club with the remaining security, waiting for the trap to spring. Through her earpiece, she heard Lin's voice. calm, measured, the sound of a man trying to save someone who might already be lost. We need to talk about Mother. And in that moment, watching two brothers stand in an alley while their loyalty tore them apart, Jane understood exactly what the 7-Star Syndicate had known all along. The strongest weapon wasn't violence, it was love, and the people you'd die for were always the ones who could destroy you most completely. Lynn's brother reached into his jacket, and Jane's finger moved to her earpiece, ready to give the order that would change everything. Lynn's brother didn't pull a weapon, he pulled out his phone. "They have someone at Mother's facility," Wee said, his voice cracking. "Right now. If I don't confirm the meeting details in the next 5 minutes, they'll hurt her." Jane's blood went cold. Through her scope, she could see Wee's hands shaking. Before she could respond, her phone rang, the safe house number. Torres, the woman watching Zara. "Jane?" Her voice was controlled, but Jane could hear the fear underneath. 3 men just breached the perimeter, professional equipment. They knew where every camera was. "Where's Zara?" "Panic room, locked down, but they're not trying to break in. They left a phone on the porch, it's ringing." Jane was already sprinting toward the fire escape. Chen pulled the car around, tires screaming. She dove in as he accelerated. "Answer it," Jane said. "Speaker." 10 seconds later, a man's voice filled the line, Korean accent, unnervingly calm. "Jane, I'm Park Min-ho, 7-Star Syndicate." A pause. "Your daughter is beautiful, 6 years old, likes purple, has asthma requiring twice daily medication." Jane's vision tunneled. "If you touch her..." "We won't. Not if you follow instructions." Park's voice remained pleasant. "That panic room is impressive, reinforced steel, biometric locks, but it has one weakness. The oxygen system runs on a closed loop. Your daughter has about 3 hours of air, maybe less with her condition." "What do you want?" "John Kang, Club Exodus, 10 p.m. He walks in alone, surrenders himself. You and your soldiers stay away." Pause. "Or we cut the oxygen supply completely." The line went dead. Chen took a corner hard. "We're 15 minutes out." Jane's phone buzzed. "Lynn, Wee says there's a secondary team at your mother's facility, armed. This was always about leverage." Another text from John. "I'm going. Tell me where they want me." Jane typed back. "No, they'll kill you." John. "I know, but I'm not letting a child die because of my war." Jane made 4 calls to Marines she'd served with. All 4 said yes before she finished explaining. 30 minutes, Webb said. "We'll meet you at the safe house." They made it in 12 minutes. Torres met her at the door, weapon drawn. "Panic room is secure. Zara thinks we're practicing drills, but they cut the main oxygen line. We're on reserve tanks, maybe 2 hours if she stays calm." Jane's phone rang. Park again. "I see you went to the safe house. Sentimental but useless. The clock is ticking. Your daughter is using approximately 12 liters per minute. I'd estimate closer to 90 minutes than 2 hours. I'm going to kill you," Jane said flatly. "Perhaps, but not before you choose. Your daughter or John Kang. You can't save both." Webb and his team arrived 23 minutes later, 4 Marines carrying duffel bags that probably violated 6 California laws. "What's the play?" Webb asked. "They want us divided. Me here protecting Zara while they take John." Jane traced the oxygen lines on the blueprint. "But we're not reacting defensively. We're attacking both locations simultaneously." "That's suicide math." "No, that's surprise." Jane checked her weapon. "You 4 stay here, protect Zara. Hold this position no matter what. And you?" "Club Exodus. I'm showing them what happens when you threaten a Marine's child." Lynn arrived with Chen and the security team, 8 men total. "John's already inside," Lynn said. "Wouldn't wait. Said if he was the target, he'd be the bait." Jane gathered everyone, spread the club schematics, pointed to entries, choke points, extraction routes. "This isn't rescue. This is elimination. The 7-Star Syndicate came into our home, threatened our people." She met each person's eyes. "We end them. Completely. Tonight."
20 minutes later, Jane stood outside Club Exodus with 7 men at her back and her daughter counting down oxygen 15 miles away. The club's neon sign flickered. Bass thumped from inside. Her phone buzzed. A photo from inside. John on his knees, hands zip-tied, gun to his head. Underneath, "You're too late." Jane smiled. The smile her CO used to call her pre-violence face. She signaled Chen. The power to Club Exodus cut out, and in the darkness, Jane moved. The darkness inside Club Exodus lasted exactly 8 seconds, long enough for Jane to move through the main entrance, past the panicked civilians scrambling for exits, into the VIP section where emergency lighting cast everything in blood-red shadows. She found John exactly where the photo showed him, on his knees, zip-tied, but the gun wasn't at his head anymore. It was on the floor, next to the body of the man who was holding it. John looked up at her. Blood splattered across his face that wasn't his own. Took you long enough. Jane killed him with his hands tied? Jane scanned the room. 3 more bodies. Professional kills. Efficient. I told you I survived Korea for a reason. John struggled to his feet. Park's upstairs. Private office. He's got 6 men with him and he's watching the security feeds. Jane cut his zip ties with her knife. Lynn? Went after his brother. Wei ran when the lights cut. John rubbed his wrists. Jane, Wei's working directly with Park. Not leverage anymore. Choice. Chen's voice crackled through her earpiece. We've got civilians evacuating. The building's clear except for the upper level. But we've got a problem. 2 vehicles just pulled up outside. Reinforcements. Jane's jaw tightened. Webb, status on the safe house? Holding. No movement yet. Zara's still stable, but we're at 60 minutes of oxygen. 60 minutes? Jane did the math. 20 minutes to secure Park, 20 minutes back to the safe house. That left 20 minutes of margin. Not enough. John, can you get to the basement? Override the security lockdown from there. Yes, but do it. Get this building locked down. Nobody else gets in or out. Jane moved toward the stairs. Chen, you're with me. Everyone else, hold the ground floor. The stairwell was dark. Emergency lighting flickered every couple of seconds, casting strobing shadows that made movement disorienting. Jane climbed with her weapon up, each step measured, listening for ambush. She heard them before she saw them, 2 men at the landing above, waiting in the darkness between light pulses. The first one rushed when she was 3 steps from the top. Tactical mistake. High ground advantage disappeared when you gave up position. Jane dropped low, let his momentum carry him past her, used his own weight to throw him down the stairs behind her.
The second one was smarter, stayed back, waited for her to come to him. She didn't give him the chance. Pulled a flashbang from her vest, tossed it up and around the corner, closed her eyes. The blast was deafening in the enclosed space. When she opened her eyes, the second man was on the ground, disoriented. She was past him in seconds, Chen right behind her, both of them moving toward the private office at the end of the hall. The door was reinforced steel, biometric lock. "We don't have time for this," Chen said. Jane pulled out her phone, texted Lynn, "Need your help. Top floor, private office, now." The response was immediate. 2 minutes. They didn't have 2 minutes. Jane could hear movement inside, voices, Park giving orders in Korean. Then she heard something else. Shouting, a scuffle, a gunshot. The door opened. Lin stood there, blood on his knuckles, his suit jacket torn. Behind him, Wei was on the ground, clutching his leg where a bullet had grazed him. "He tried to warn them," Lin said quietly. "Tried to send a message. I stopped him." Wei looked up at his brother, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't have a choice. They would have killed her. Mom, they would have—" "You always had a choice." Lin's voice was flat, empty. "You just chose wrong." Jane moved past them into the office. Park stood behind a massive desk, watching security feeds on 6 monitors. He didn't look surprised to see her, didn't reach for the weapon on his desk. "Miss Brooks, impressive." He gestured at the screens showing the carnage below. "You trained them well, but you're still too late." "For what?" Park smiled,
pulled out his phone, showed her the screen. Live feed from the safe house. Webb and his team, weapons up, facing the panic room door, which was opening. Biometric locks work both ways, Park said. We didn't cut the oxygen. We hacked the system, made you think your daughter was suffocating so you'd do exactly what you did, leave her with minimal protection while you came here. He pressed a button. My men have been inside your panic room for the last 20 minutes, waiting. Jane's heart stopped. The screen showed 2 men inside the panic room. Zara was between them, clutching Mr. Hoppy, confused but not crying. Here's what happens next, Park said. You kill me, they kill her. You let me walk out, I make a phone call, and she goes free. Simple transaction. Jane's finger tightened on her trigger. Every instinct screamed to put a bullet through Park's head. But Zara's face on that screen, small and scared, and trusting that her mother would fix this. There's a third option, John said from the doorway. He was covered in blood, breathing hard, holding a phone. I already called it in. Federal building is 3 blocks. FBI has been investigating 7 Star for money laundering. I just gave them enough evidence to bury you for life. He showed Park his phone. Your accounts are frozen. Your properties are seized. Your men in that panic room, they just got the notification that their payment isn't coming. Park's expression finally changed. You're bluffing. Am I? John smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. You spent years trying to destroy me, forgot that I spent years learning how to survive men like you. FBI's been my insurance policy since I arrived in America. Every transaction, every deal, every piece of evidence I needed to stay alive. He stepped closer. You think you're the monster in this story. You're not. You're just the mistake I'm correcting. Jane's earpiece crackled. Webb's voice. Jane, the guys in the panic room just surrendered, threw down their weapons, begging us not to shoot them. What the hell did John do? She didn't answer, just watched Park's face cycle through rage, fear, and finally resignation. You can kill me, Park said, but 7 Star is bigger than me. Someone else will come. Let them. Lynn stepped forward, his weapon steady. And we'll end them too, however many it takes. Park looked at Lynn, then at Jane, then at John. You're all monsters, you know that? Jane thought about the bodies downstairs, the violence she'd just committed, the ease with which she'd slipped back into the person she'd tried to leave. Yes, Jane said, but we're monsters who protect our own. The gunshot came from behind them. Wei, on the ground, had pulled a backup weapon from his ankle holster. The bullet meant for Jane hit Lynn instead, catching him in the shoulder, spinning him backward. Lynn didn't go down. He turned, weapon up, and for 3 seconds the 2 brothers stared at each other across the distance.
Who was trying to edge toward the door. And survivors do what they have to do. Park made it 2 steps before Chen put him on the ground with a single strike to the back of the head. 28 minutes later, Jane burst through the safe house door to find Zara sitting at the kitchen table eating ice cream with Webb, completely unaware that she'd been at the center of a hostage situation. "Mama!" Zara jumped up, vanilla ice cream on her face. "Mr. Webb taught me how to play Go Fish. I won 3 times." Jane dropped to her knees and pulled her daughter into a hug that probably lasted too long, breathed in the smell of her shampoo, felt her small heartbeat against her chest. "I love you," Jane whispered. "So much." "I love you too, Mama. Can we have ice cream for breakfast tomorrow?" Jane laughed. It came out broken. "Yeah, baby, we can have ice cream for breakfast." Later, after Zara was asleep and the safe house was quiet, Jane found John and Lynn sitting in the backyard. John had his ribs wrapped. Lynn had his shoulder bandaged. Both of them looked like they'd survived a war, which, Jane supposed, they had. "Park's in FBI custody," John said. "His organization's collapsing. Won't be a threat anymore." "And Wei?" Jane asked. Lynn stared at his hands. "Coroner ruled it self-defense, which it was." He looked up. "Doesn't make it easier." "No," Jane said. "It doesn't." They sat in silence for a while, 3 people who'd killed to protect what mattered.
3 people who'd crossed lines they couldn't uncross. "We're monsters," Lynn said again. "Maybe," John replied, "but we're monsters who keep our people safe. Monsters who choose loyalty over survival. Monsters who'd burn the world down for family." He looked at Jane. That's worth something. Jane thought about Zara sleeping upstairs, about the life she'd been trying to build that had burned down, about the new one she'd have to create from the ashes. "Yeah," she said finally, "it's worth something." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "The 7-Star Syndicate thanks you for eliminating Park Min-ho. He was becoming a liability. Consider his termination a professional courtesy. We'll be in touch." Jane showed the text to John and Lynn. "They're not done with us," Lynn said. "No," John agreed. "They're not." Jane deleted the text, looked at the 2 men who'd somehow become her family in the span of 3 weeks. "Then we'd better be ready," she said, "because next time we won't wait for them to come to us."
I'm glad you made it to the end. Thank you for joining me in this wonderful experience. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. See you soon!